Hello everyone, Keith here, back with another video with part 4, I think, of this act. So yeah, let's get right into it. Paragraph 2 requires the terms of the instrument exercising the power of appointment to manifest the power holder's intent to exercise the power of appointment. Whether a power holder has manifest an intent to exercise the power of appointment is a question of construction. See generally reinstatement third of property, wills and other detonative transfers. For example, a power holder's disposition of appointed property may manifest an intent to exercise the power even though the power holder does not refer to the power. See reinstatement third of property. Wills and other detonative transfers. Paragraph 2 also requires that the terms of the instrument exercising the power must, subject to section 304, satisfy the requirements of exercise, if any, imposed by the donor. Language expressing the intent to exercise the power is clearest if it makes a specific reference to the creating instrument and exercises the power of unequivocal terms and with careful attention to the requirements of exercise, if any, imposed by the donor. The recommended method for exercising the power of appointment is by a specific exercise clause, using language such as the following. I hereby exercise the power of appointment conferred upon me by my father's will as follows. I appoint, fill in the details of appointment. Not recommended is a blanket exercise clause which purports to exercise any power of appointment. The power holder may have using language such as the following. I hereby exercise any power of appointment I may have as follows. I appoint, fill in the details of appointment. All through a blanket exercise clause does manifest an intent to exercise any power of appointment the power holder may have. Such a clause raises the often litigated question of whether it satisfies the requirement of specific reference imposed by the donor in the instrument creating the power. A blending clause purports to blend the appointed property with the power holder's owned property in a common disposition. The exercise portion of a blending clause can take the form of a specific exercise, or more commonly, a blanket exercise. For example, a clause providing all the residue of my estate, including the property over which I have a power of appointment under my mother's will, I devise as follows. A blending clause with a specific exercise. A clause providing all the residue of my estate, including any property of which I may have a power of appointment, I devise as follows. Is a blending clause with a blanket exercise. This act aims to eliminate any significance attached to those use of a blending clause. A blending clause has traditionally been regarded as significant in the application of the doctrines of selective allocation and capture. This act eliminates the significance of such a clause under those doctrines. See section 309, selective allocation, and 310, capture. The use of a blending clause is more likely to be a product of the forms used by the power holder's lawyer and a deliberate decision by the power holders to facilitate the application of the doctrines of the selective allocation or capture. If a power holder decides not to exercise a specific power or any power that the power holder might have, it is important to consider whether to depend on mere silence to produce a non-exercise or to take the definitive action to ensure a non-exercise. Definitive action can take the form of release during life. See section 401, or a non-exercise clause in the power holder's will, or other relevant instrument. A non-exercise clause can take the form of a specific non-exercise clause. For example, I hereby do not exercise the power of appointment conferred on me by my father's trust, or the form of a non-blanket non-exercise clause. For example, I hereby do not exercise any power of appointment I may have. In certain circumstances, different consequences depend on the power holder's choice. Under section 302, a residuary clause in the power holder's will is treated as manifesting intent to exercise a general power in certain limited circumstances if the power holder silently failed to exercise the power, but not if the power holder released the power or refrained in a procured from exercising it. Under section 310, unappointed property passes to the power holder's estate in certain limited circumstances if the power holder silently failed to exercise the general power, but passes to the donor or the donor's successors in interest if the power holder is released or the power or refrained in a record from exercising it. Paragraph 3 Paragraph 3 requires the appointment to constitute a permissible exercise of the power. On permissible and impermissible exercise, see sections 305 to 307. The law of the power holder's domicile governs whether or not the power holder has effectively exercised the power of appointment, unless the terms of the instrument creating the power manifest for a different intent. See reinstatement second of conflict of laws. The rule of this section is consistent with, and this comment draws on, reinstatement third of property, wills and other donative transfers, and the accompanying commentary. Section 302. Intent exercise. Determining intent from residuary clause. In this section, residuary clause means a residuary clause purporting to dispose only of the power holder's own property. B. A residuary clause manifests the power holder's intent to exercise the power of appointment only if 1. The terms of the instrument containing the residuary clause do not manifest a contrary intent. 2. The power is a general power. 3. There is no taker in default of appointment, or the gift in default clause is ineffective. And 4. The holder did not release or refrain in a record from exercising the power. Comment. This section addresses a questioning arising under Section 301. Section 2. A. Namely, whether the power holder's intent to exercise a power of appointment is manifested by a residuary clause purporting to dispose only of the power holder's own estate, such as all the residue of my estate, I devise to, or all of my estate, I devise to. This section does not address the effect of a residuary clause that contains a blanket exercise or specific exercise of a power of appointment. On blanket exercise, these specific exercise clauses, see the comment to Section 301. The rule of this section is a residuary clause purporting to dispose only of the power holder's own estate manifest an intent to exercise a power of appointment only if 1. The terms of the instrument containing the residuary clause do not manifest a contrary intent. 2. The power in question is a general power. 3. The donor did not provide for takers in default, or the gift in default clause is ineffective. And 4. The power holder did not release or refrain in a record from exercising the power. The rule stated in this section applies to residuary clause that disposes only if the power holder's own estate. This garden variety residuary clause, in contrast, a residuary clause that disposes of all property that is subject to disposition by the power holder is a blanket exercise clause. See Section 102(3). In a well-planned estate, a power of appointment, whether general or non-general, is accompanied by a gift in default. In a less carefully planned estate, on the other hand, there may be no gift in default clause, or if there is such a clause, the clause may be wholly or partly ineffective, to the extent that the donor did not provide for takers in default, or the gift in default clause is ineffective. It is more efficient to attribute the power holder the intent to exercise a general power in favor of the power holder's residuary devices. The principal benefit of attributing the power holder the intent to exercise a power holder is that it allows the property to pass under the power holder's will instead of as part of a donor's estate. Because the donor's death would normally have occurred before the power holder died, some of the donor's successors might themselves have predeceased the power holder. It is more efficient to avoid tracing the interest through multiple estates to determine who are the present successors. Moreover, to the extent that the donor did not provide for takers in default, it is also more in accord with the donor's probable intent for the power holder's reductory clause to be treated as exercising the power. A gift in default clause can be ineffective or partially ineffective for a variety of reasons. The clause might cover only part of the appointed property. The clause might be invalid because it violates a rule against perpetuities or some other rule, or it might be ineffective because it conditioned the interests of the takers in default on an uncertain event that did not happen, the most common of which is an unsatisfied condition of arrival. Under no circumstance does a residuary clause manifest an intent to exercise a non-general power. A residuary clause disposes of the power holder's own property, and a non-general power is not an ownership equivalent power. The rule of this section is consistent with, and this comment draws on, reinstatement third of property, rules and other punitive transfers, and the accompanying commentary. Alright guys, it's Amanda here, and I'll see you guys next video. Like, subscribe. Bye.